Well, thanks, Bob, for being here.
Pleasure.
We're going to be talking about the Shroud of Turin. And real quick, what I want to start with is a lot of people don't really know and understand what that is. So could we just talk about a little bit about the shroud and what it actually is?
Yes. Well, a shroud is a cloth that a person was buried in. It's a burial cloth. Shroud of Turin is just an indication where it is. It's located in Turin, Italy. Turin is up in the northwestern corner of Italy. It's where Fiats are made. There was an Olympics there a few years ago.
Okay. And so talk to me a little bit about the shroud with regards to the burial of Jesus.
Yes.
And so that's kind of our topic a little bit. We're going to be talking about that some here. Talk to me a little bit about what you're doing with all that.
Yes, there's a little bit of background here. The Shroud of Turin is fairly famous. It's been on the cover of U.S. News. It's been on the cover of Time. This was back 15 years ago or so. But the best spread on this was in National Geographic, June of 1980, where, and this was 2 years after the STURP team, that Shroud of Turin research project, sent 26 people in to investigate the Shroud of Turin hands-on for 5 days, 24 hours a day. So this was published 2 years after that investigation, and this shows very nicely on a 4-page spread here. It shows the front image of a crucified man, and then it shows a back image of a crucified man, head to head. So what this actually is, that when they brought Jesus down from the cross, they brought him into the tomb, and in my thinking, it was the Apostle John, Nicodemus, and Joseph of Arimathea, and maybe one of their servants. There's limitation as to how many people you can get into the tomb. But they would have brought Jesus in. They would have laid the back of this cloth. This cloth is about 14.5 feet long, 3.5 feet wide. And they would have brought Jesus in, laid him down on this part of the cloth, right here. And I think of the Apostle John as being right up at the head of what they call the pit inside the tomb, so that he would have hands on the body. So he would reach over and he would take what's called the face cloth, which was about that big, take that off, fold it up or roll it up, and just lay it aside. If he's right-handed, he'd just lay it onto the right shelf. There would be a left shelf cut into the tomb, a right shelf, and a back shelf or bench.
Okay.
And they've done archaeological digs on over 1,000 tombs in Jerusalem, so they know how these were built. So that they'd lay Jesus down on the back of the cloth, take the face cloth off, lay it aside, and then put this over the top so that you can see how if there's something emanating from the body in a vertical orientation, you could get an image burned into the cloth of the front of the body and the back of the body, and that's what I believe happened. And so do I believe that this is the authentic burial cloth of Jesus? Yes, that's my conviction. It is.
And you spent quite a few years researching, doing mathematical formulas with regards to all the stuff that's involved with the shroud. So talk to us a little bit about that and how, just a brief overview of kind of what you're doing with regards to the shroud.
Well, yes, my experience with the shroud, I've never seen it personally. I don't need to go there to the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin. I don't need to go there to know that it exists. Okay, I can know that it does exist. But my interest started in this when I saw a little article about 3 inches by 3 inches in the Parade magazine when I was about 16 years old or so. My wife saw the same item, which showed a little tiny picture, said some people believe this is the burial cloth of Jesus. And I said, no, it can't possibly be. I mean, if that were in existence, everyone would know about it. It'd be the second most important possession of the human race next to the Bible. Well, but then I thought, well, I need to be open to it. And then I came across this little book from 1973 It is the Lord. Read that. Then Ian Wilson came out with this book in '78, his first of, I think, 5 or 6 books on the Shroud of Turin by Ian Wilson. And then I read this wonderful book, Verdict on the Shroud, by Kenneth Stevenson and Gary Habermas. Rather famous book.
So this curiosity was kind of birthed in you from a very young age.
Oh, well,
I mean,
16 or so, and then I came across these. You know, I was aware of the possibility. And as I encountered books on the topic, I started reading them. But I never really had time to get into it on a full-time basis until about 2 years ago. Fortunately, I was laid off from work. And at that point then, I had the time, I had a computer fast enough to do the work, and I had about 10 years experience on a nuclear analysis computer code called MCNP, which is an acronym for Monte Carlo Neutron Particle. So it tracks neutrons and particles through any geometry which you define. So I defined a body, a human body, about 5'10" high, about 170 pounds, lying in a cloth, just simple modeling procedures, lying in a tomb as they were designed at that point. And then one at a time, I had the computer code track neutrons one at a time until it reached about 30 million neutrons. And based on that, I could get good enough statistics as to where all those neutrons went. And this whole project was to explain the carbon-14 dating problem for the Shroud of Turin. Mm-hmm. See, that issue came up because when the scientists went in 1978, and they were given 5 days, 24 hours a day, to do any non-destructive test they wanted to on the Shroud, some of them were believers, probably most of them were not believers. They thought, well, it's just painted.
Right.
And they said, well, give us half an hour with our high-powered microscope. We'll go and prove to you it was a painting. So they said, fine, you do that. So after half an hour, they came away and they said, it's not a painting. There's no paint, there's no carrier, and there's no brush strokes. Can't possibly be a painting. So they said, well, maybe it's some type of a scorch. Fine, you do that test. So they turned off all the lights. They brought in a black light, shone it over the whole shroud, and all of the scorch marks luminesced, but the body image did not. So it's not a scorch. So they did very simplistic tests initially. They ruled out some of the most obvious possibilities. So over that 5-day period, a lot of them came to believe there's no other option.
Yeah.
This has to be authentic.
Yeah.
And most people bought into that at that point. But then in 1988, 3 samples were taken from down near the foot region, right down here, and right down here, a small piece was cut about like this, divided into sections, sent off to 3 different laboratories in Tucson, Zurich, Switzerland, and Oxford, England. And the data came back, they averaged the data, and they said, we've proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's a forgery. Well, people who knew the other evidence said that cannot possibly be.
Right.
So I read that statistical analysis in the British journal Nature about 1990. I read it over, was puzzled for a few minutes, and then I realized, based on the data, that the nail print went through the wrist, which was here.
Right here, yep.
If it went through the palm, as all the other paintings of the Middle Ages had it would simply tear through because there was no bone structure. It had to go through the wrist. The Shroud of Turin got it right, contrary to all paintings from the Middle Ages. I said, this cannot be a painting or anything, any kind of forgery from the Middle Ages. It gets it right. It also got right the fact that when the nail goes through the wrist, it automatically folds over the thumbs. All the paintings from the Middle Ages got it wrong. They didn't know that. But the Shroud of Turin got it right. There's no thumbs showing. So I said, well, what could affect the carbon dating? Well, at that point in my life, I had 19 years experience calculating neutron distributions in nuclear reactors. So I knew that what shape the neutron distribution would take inside the tomb. And I looked at the data from the individual laboratories, and I said, I know why they got it wrong. But it took until just about 2 years ago to actually prove why they did. So then I took that answer. In October of 2014, I took my calculations and my write-up, my PowerPoint slides, to the Shroud of Turin conference in St. Louis.
Right. And so you basically, what I heard you say is that as a young child, you came into this kind of, piqued your interest. Through the years, you read some information, but really didn't have an opportunity to study it. Then you had a little break in your work there, so then you kind of dove into it, right?
Yes.
And then and about what was that time when you had the break and you really kind of dove into it, time frame wise?
Well, let's say it was probably the beginning of 2014.
Okay. And then, so recently, you went back to St. Louis, as you said.
Yes.
And went to this conference, and you actually did a presentation.
It was an hour-long presentation. Most everyone else had a half hour. They gave me an hour because of the importance of this issue. The only evidence that is contrary to the idea that this is the authentic burial cloth of Jesus was the carbon-14 dating that was done in 1988. And so that they were very interested in my results because computer calculations, nuclear analysis computer calculations, had never been done on the Shroud of Turin.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a unique thing. I mean, it's not something that, your history,
Yes.
your background, combined with what's going on, probably don't find that too often. And
as far as I can determine, there's no one else in the world that would be interested with the capability to actually do this.
Yeah, right.
So there were three different mysteries related to this. One was, how in the world could the Shroud of Turin be authentic and yet date to 1260 AD? Secondly, when you look at the data from the laboratories, it does not agree between the different laboratories. There was a slope across the data depending on the distance from the end of the shroud.
Oh.
Why was there a slope? Third mystery actually related to the face cloth, which they still have. I believe it's authentic. It's located in the city of Oviedo, Spain. It's small, about like this, has no image on it, but it does have blood identical to the blood that's on the Shroud of Turin. AB positive, high in bilirubin, which is a compound that the liver produces based on when the liver processes damaged red blood cells after some kind of an extremely severe beating. Like if a person is beat to death,
Right.
his liver processes, while the process is going on of being beat to death, his liver is processing those damaged red blood cells. And it raises the bilirubin content in the blood. And that high bilirubin content is on the Shroud of Turin, in the actual human blood that's on the Shroud of Turin. It's also on the face cloth, the Sudarium of Oviedo, it's called.
Yeah.
And so the problem was that Sudarium of Oviedo dated to 700 AD when carbon-14 dating was done on it.
Oh, I see.
My calculations explain all three of those mysteries. It explains if neutrons are released from the body, and that's my hypothesis, and with that hypothesis, I explain the three mysteries: how the Shroud of Turin can date to 1260 AD, how the slope across the experimental data can give you a slope of 42 years per centimeter, and how the Sudarium of Oviedo could date to 700 AD by simply being placed at the right hand side on that right shelf in the tomb.
Wow. So when you did your presentation in St. Louis, you also had some people that piqued their interest, that were listening obviously to you, and some of that was in a new book that just came out. So share a little bit about the book that you shared with me about the gentleman who just published this. Yeah.
Yep, we'll get there.
Okay.
I might mention that at the conference, my topic, I think was, and others agreed, that it was the most, well, certainly one of the most important items there. And I was pleased to receive the only standing ovation at this 3-day conference.
There you go.
So yeah, so people did appreciate it, but I had been interacting with a man named Mark Antonassi, and Mark put in 18 years researching and then publishing this book, The Resurrection of the Shroud, which he published in 2000. And then he spent 15 years on this book, which just came out, Test the Shroud. And this talks about why we need additional testing on the shroud and how that should be done and what could be determined based on those tests. So this is to try and build public support for additional testing of the shroud.
Okay.
And so Appendix H in this book is my contribution to this book.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. So in all that, so where are you going to go now from this point in time? What's kind of on the next? You have 4 papers that you had said you were going to be publishing with regards.
I have 4 papers that need to be published, and once I get these published, then I have to write a technical paper on my calculations, because I've not done that yet. It's only on the conference, on the conference website.
Okay.
That's there. And so it needs to be published as a technical paper.
And so if people want to go to the website, what's the website about the conference?
Okay, you can research, find this on the internet under my name,
Okay.
Robert A. Rucker.
Okay.
And then you could put in the code name MCNP, neutron analysis,
Okay.
for example, and that will get you there. You can also go to shroud.com,
right.
which is where most of the papers related to the Shroud of Turin
Okay.
are located, and that will then lead you to the conference site. So there's various ways to do it.
All right.
So my paper was called MCNP Analysis of Neutrons Released from Jesus' Body in the Resurrection. So if you put that into the internet, it'll come up.
And they can actually see your presentation?
Yes, both the PowerPoint slides and the narration to my PowerPoint slides.
Okay. And so from here, you're going to do the articles. You're going to be attempting to publish those.
Yes.
And then what?
Well, I write my technical paper.
Okay.
And then I have so many other ideas, it's hard to keep track of them all.
Yeah.
And so...
Well, you're an engineer, right? So.
I know. So we're going to be developing options for additional carbon-14 dating.
Yeah.
And then I want to interact with people in Europe, Italy specifically.
Yeah.
And the shroud right now is owned by the current Pope. And so we have to make the argument to the Pope and his scientific advisors for the usefulness of additional testing in order to invalidate the carbon dating that was done in 1988. Because when my computer calculations were done, the shape of the neutron flux in the tomb was something like this. It was very low in the feet area where the sample was taken, but then it peaks up near the center of the body mass. So the carbon date that I'm predicting up, if we could get a sample right underneath the backbone, we're not going to get a sample there, but if we could, that ought to date to 8,500 AD, way in the future, due to neutron absorption in the nitrogen-14 in the cloth.
Okay.
So the nitrogen-14 then absorbs a neutron, goes to carbon-14, which is indistinguishable from the original carbon-14 that was there when the plant was growing. And that's why they dated it incorrectly, because the nitrogen-14 down near the feet absorbed neutrons that were released from the body in the resurrection.
Okay. So what do you hope to accomplish with all this? I mean, what's your kind of end goal? What would you like people to know in terms of just the shroud and just ultimately that this is the burial cloth of Jesus? Or what's your whole, I mean, what's driving you to the end result? What do you hope to accomplish by all this?
It's my belief the Shroud of Turin is the authentic burial cloth of Jesus.
Yeah.
And this cloth contains physical evidence for his death, burial, and resurrection.
Yeah.
And that's the gospel.
Yeah.
So what we have here, I believe that the scientific data will force us to believe in the resurrection.
Yeah.
I believe that's where it's leading us.
Yeah. So, and obviously in the scientific community, carbon dating is a big issue.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so talk to us a little bit about the inconsistencies in carbon dating. I mean, just from a general standpoint, I know I've heard various kind of views on carbon dating. And so what's your view on the accuracy of the carbon dating, of just in general?
Sure. Great question. The layman sees a carbon date that's publicized by the media, and they automatically think that science, it's absolutely accurate. So the question is carbon dating accurate?
Yeah.
Well, carbon dating is just one of many different forms of radiometric dating. And I always answer the question whether carbon dating is accurate. I say, yes, it is accurate to the extent that the assumptions of the methodology are true.
Help us with that a little bit.
Yes.
So the average viewer out there, I don't know that
it's going to be what that says. What that says is you have to get into the details of it to determine whether you actually expect it to be accurate or not. Specifically, one of the assumptions of carbon dating is that the carbon-14 atoms are neither added nor subtracted from the sample. For example, that they're not being produced by neutron absorption. And that's a very common assumption, and that's the assumption that would have been made by the dating laboratories. But what I'm saying is that assumption is wrong.
Okay, so from a practical standpoint, other than this, let's say, okay, so you always hear that the Earth is billions and billions of years old, okay, right?
Yes.
And so obviously, talk to us with regards to carbon dating, and that's where we get into the controversy with the age of things, really. And they're saying, hey, scientists are saying, hey, the Earth is billions of years old because of the carbon dating that are from what?
Yes. Okay. Well, let me address that.
Okay.
The half-life of carbon is 5,730 years.
Okay.
So that if we were to live another 5,730 years, we could do a test on these same samples, and the amount of carbon-14 would be reduced by half.
The sample from what?
From anything.
From anything.
Yes. If you have 100 carbon-14 atoms, after 5,730 years, on the average, you'd only have 50 left. They would have decayed.
Okay, I see.
Now, what that means is that the dating technique of carbon-14 dating is not accurate for anything millions or billions of years old. They don't use it for that. It only goes out to several thousand years, 50,000 years max. So there's other methodologies that are related to the age of the Earth and the universe. The Shroud of Turin really doesn't relate to the age of the Earth or the age of the universe.
Right.
It doesn't relate.
Well, I was just trying
to
correlate the two, how people, say carbon dating is kind of it in terms of just how you predict the age of something.
Yes.
And then the accuracy of that.
Let me give you the general accuracy. Archaeologists would say that 50% of the time, carbon dating gives you a reliable answer. 25% of the time, maybe it's within the uncertainty range. Within maybe 3 sigma, what would be called 99% uncertainty range.
Right.
About 25%, it's just way off and to be ignored.
Okay.
And that would be because the sample is contaminated for some reason. Carbon's come in, carbon's lost. The ratio has changed for some reason.
Right.
And usually scientists have no idea whether that's happened or not. The only way you can determine is that if the answer turns out to be what the archaeologists don't expect.
All right. So do you feel like in the scientific community, I know with people that are scientists that are out there, is it so much that carbon dating with regards to age, age of things, I guess, or whatever it is that you're testing, could be a major argument against this? I mean, yes?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
The major argument, if you tell anyone, I believe in the Shroud of Turin,
right.
I believe it's authentic, they say, oh, pooh, it's been carbon dated to the Middle Ages, end of story.
Yeah.
That's where they go.
Okay. But you're saying
that's not true.
All right.
That there's a reason for it. As soon as you have to recognize that the resurrection of Jesus is an extremely unusual event.
Right.
His body was made up of proteins, which were made up of molecules, which were made up of atoms, which were made up of neutrons, protons, and electrons. In the resurrection, when his body disappeared from within the shroud, within the tomb, where did they go?
Yeah.
what happened to those neutrons, protons, and electrons? And so what I'm saying is that 99.999999985% of them transitioned into an alternate dimensionality, whereas 0.0000000015% were left behind, which then altered the carbon dating. And that would be, it's an extremely small fraction, about 1 part in a billion is all that I need to shift the carbon date from 30 AD to 1260 AD.
Interesting, very interesting.
Yep.
Well, I'm glad you're doing this, and I'm glad you're...
It's fun. It's fun.
I know that it's a gift of yours, and you're passionate about it. I know you're passionate about it because I've heard you many times talk about it, and every time it comes up, you really get involved, and you get really passionate about talking about the Shroud. And it's amazing that, you know, we have different people in different walks of life that all kind of come together with these different components about the death and resurrection of Jesus. And this is one area that I don't really interest me. It fascinates me, and I'm glad you're doing the work. I'm glad that you're involved in it. I know that our students are going to be getting more of it here soon. You've been kind of in and out this past year, but we're going to try and get you into the college and have you do a few presentations on the Shroud as well. But I wish you the best on this. I hope that your information gets out there, and if there's any way that we can get this information out to the folks, you know, out into communities and out and about beyond our communities.
Yes.
I hope we can do that. That's kind of what we're trying to do and accomplish here today. So any last thoughts that you want to share with us before we get rolling?
Yes, I spent about 8 months helping Mark Antonacci
Yeah.
on writing this book, Test the Shroud. But they can buy these different resources.
Okay.
I do recommend these. And we have high expectations of this line of thinking. And we want to be accurate in our science. We want to allow the possibility of God's existence and for the possibility of the resurrection of Jesus, because I believe it's historically proven that it's true.
Yeah. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do at Gather From Christian College, is teaching from a biblical worldview and trying to incorporate different components, mathematically obviously, through science, through math, some of these concepts. And that's the difference between teaching from a biblical worldview and a worldview. And so, which is really, really important. And you know, we were just talking to a student just before this that you're going to be coming in and doing this presentation, and she loves math. And so her eyes just lit up because she's just passionate about math.
Oh, yes.
And she wanted to see some of the calculations that you were doing and that kind of thing. So it's interesting how you can incorporate the Bible across the curriculum, and it can really be something that is done not only in math but in science, but in all the Bible classes as well. So anyway, well, thanks for sharing today. It was good to have you. And,
yes,
and,
very good.
Yes, and so we appreciate you coming out, and I'm sure we'll hear more about it.